think we have a quorum, so it's good to have everyone here for our first meeting of Game Fishing Parks. We welcome all of our guests and new faces and the same usual faces, some of them. Yeah, Roger, we're going to keep you awake. Don't worry. Something like that. Good to have everybody. If you will, look in your folder, and you'll see our rules that we'll conduct our meetings according to for 2015-2016. We'll ask you to look through them while we carry on with a couple of other little housekeeping items. We have some new members that are a part of our committee. So at this time, I'm going to ask the new members to introduce themselves and tell us anything pertinent about them or their service they would like to. And I'm going to start with our new vice chair, Bruce Broderick, from up in the Dalton area, I think. That's correct. Is correct. So I'm going to, Bruce, you're going to have, I think you're number 5, and y'all bear with us when it's your turn to speak. If you'll identify your microphone, we'll make sure we get that microphone turned on. Bruce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Bruce Broderick. I'm a community pharmacist from Dalton, Georgia, and beginning my second term in the legislature. And very honored to be on this committee and very honored to be vice chair. And I look forward to working with all of you. And like I told the commissioner the other day, I think our natural resources that we have, our parks and our game and fish recreational activities are a tremendous asset that the state has, and that we need to do everything we can to enhance and improve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. We're pleased to have you, and you did a good job announcing. You're already trying to supplant the chairman by announcing from the well this morning the meeting. So
glad to.
We'll keep an eye on you. Dominic, what number are you over there?
We at 2.
You got it, brother. Go ahead.
All right. I'm Dominic Laricchia, District 169, Coffee County, Bacon County, and Jeff Davis counties. Just honored to be here and have the opportunity to serve, and look forward to learning as much as I can. I am brand new. As best I can tell, I'm about 13 days in, and so look forward to serving.
You've done a real good job so far. I want to go ahead and congratulate you on your performance so far, by the way. It's good to have you, Dominic. We're glad to have you a part of this committee. John?
I'm John Corbett, representative from District 174, which is South Lowndes, Eccles, Clinch, part of Ware, most of Charlton, a little bit of Camden counties. Like Dominic, I'm brand new, 13 days into this. Glad to be here. Look forward to working with Chairman Burns and the rest of the committee. Thank you.
We're glad to have another coastal guy. Representative Nimmer, I think you're number 8 also, or you're
7.
7. That's you. I should have known that.
Chad Nimmer, District 178, Pierce, Brantley, Wayne, and Appleton counties. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you too, I think.
You will be.
Now we're going to start with our veteran members, not our old members there. Chairman, Rules Chairman, we're going to start with our veteran members. We're going to start with Emory on that side. What number are you over there, Emory?
I'm number 10.
Go ahead.
Emory Donahue, District 30, Hall County, for Gainesville, Georgia. This is my 3rd term, and love this committee.
Glad to have you, Emory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pam?
Pam Dickerson, House District 113, which is Rockdale and Newton counties. Thank you.
And while we're coming around, y'all all know Pat Harris. She's the glue that holds this committee together, and we really appreciate Pat and everything she does for us. And if y'all need to know something about the committee, certainly she's your best asset to find out. Jim, what is 3? Jimmy Pruitt.
Representative Jimmy Pruitt from District 149, Dodge County, Telfair County, Wheeler County, a little bit of Lawrence County, a little bit of Jeff Davis County, a whole lot of hunting ground. And I'll have to say, Mr. Chairman, I believe this committee is more fun than rules. And, of course, I'm not on rules, but I'm just assuming from watching from a distance, it seems to be a lot of fun in here.
That's a safe place to be with rules from a distance.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not with them, Mr. Chairman.
Bruce.
Actually, I thought I was the vice chair, but I thought they had our names mixed up. But anyway, I'm Roger.
Close.
Yeah, I'm Roger Bruce, District 61, Fulton County, Douglas County, and Cobb County. And originally from Harlem, New York, so I know all about game fishing parks, so works out good.
He actually does. Actually does know a lot about game fishing parks, and he sponsors some good events.
Yep.
So we appreciate Representative Bruce and look forward to joining you this year on your event.
All right. Good.
Hopefully that's going to work out. Let's see. Is that about everybody? Let's see. Oh, Chairman Meadows. I almost forgot.
I'm really not
See if
with
that's
them. When I
that's
come to
two.
rules-
Chairman Meadows. Is that correct? Number 2 is. That,
Yeah, number 2.
yes, sir.
I'm John Meadows, and I'm from Gordon County. I'm glad to see at least I've got one person north of this green line that's going to make decisions for me.
Thank you, sir. I think. Representative Steve Tarvin is one of our new members. Also, Steve, we've kind of gone around the table and introduced ourselves and said, give us whatever factoid you would like to. If you'll give me that number of that mic, I'm going to turn.
Number 7.
Steve.
My name is Steve Tarvin. I'm in about my 40th day down here, and I'm here today. I'm from Walker County, Georgia, Northwest Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We look forward to working with you. Another new member of our committee from over in the Richmond County area, Representative Smith. We would have you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm Representative Ernie Smith. I'm from Augusta, Georgia. Represent Hepzibah and Augusta. If you're familiar with the area, it's called District 125. It's a pleasure to be here. There's no utility in discussing the other committees I'm on because I'm committed to ensuring that while we're here, we're going to get some things done as I can help this team right here. So it's a pleasure to be here.
And we appreciate that. And we think about Richmond County. We think about our old friend Pete Warren, who served with us on this committee for many years. Some of you remember Pete, and some of you don't. But Pete was a fine gentleman, and he early demise. But Pete, we thought a lot of Pete and held him in high esteem, and he was committed to this committee and to the out of doors, and we like I say, have good memories of Pete, especially those nice fried peanuts he always did for us. They were special to us. We're going to ask Representative Nimmer to open us with a word of prayer and a special word. Jane McCall, who's been in the hospital for the last few days, if you remember Jane, she's out and doing much better. I think that's the word from Pat, the last word. So it's a good thing. If you remember Jane and Tom, we sure would appreciate it.
All right, y'all bow with me. Father God, we thank you for this day. We just thank you for the grace and mercy you put on each one of us in our lives and our families. We just ask for a hedge of protection to be put around each of those mentioned. God, we ask a special blessing on the McCall family as Miss Jane recovers and recuperates. Just be with them. And, Lord, be with this meeting and the members that make it up, that we can be thoughtful about the decisions we make and the direction we send this state and all that we've been put as stewards in charge of. We ask it in your holy name. Amen.
A couple other special people. I've already introduced Pat, which all of y'all know, Ms. Harris. She does an excellent job for us. We appreciate her. Our committee attorney is Jeremy Ayers. Jeremy's over behind Representative Pruitt and Chairman Pruitt, and he's always done a great job. How many years have you been with this committee, Jeremy? 3 years. So we appreciate your counsel. Our committee aide is Brian Groom, and Brian was not able to be with us today, and in his stead is Tara Bookholt. I got it done. Got it. Tara Bookholt. We're glad to have Tara and appreciate you being here, Tara. And we'll welcome you at any time to come back and be with us. In addition, in our office down on the second floor, we have a new committee intern that's doing a really outstanding job for us from Georgia College and State University down in Milledgeville. Kevin, where's Kevin? Kevin Cox. There he is, to my left again. Kevin Cox. I trust him with my bag. He's got it. Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate you and look forward to your service this year. Well, we're going to move right on into business and of the committee. And first off, we always like to start off our year with with one of our good friends. Excuse me. We think the probably the best DNR commissioner anywhere around, and we're real proud of him. He's done a great job for us leading the agency and working with this committee as a former member of the House. We're glad to welcome Commissioner Mark Williams, and we'll introduce him and then have him, if he will, to introduce some of his staff that are in attendance today. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, and thank you all for having me here today.
Commissioner, let me make sure, is that 1 or 2 on the witness mic? I think I have the right
It's
one.
lit up now. I'm sorry, I thought it was lit. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. As a former member here, I can safely say unequivocally that this is the second best committee in state government besides rules. So just clearing that up for the chairman. I want to start by introducing, we had a big change last week. I know a lot of you were used to working with Homer Bryson. He was tapped by the governor and confirmed by the board on Thursday to be the commissioner of the Department of Corrections. So I want to introduce my new deputy commissioner, who was formerly Major Rabin, came up through the law enforcement division, been with the department about 23 years, and now is Deputy Commissioner Rabin. He hails from Social Circle, Georgia. Walter, if you'd stand up. If you have any questions and can't find me, better yet, you might start with Walter, some of you would say, if it was like Homer. And then also in our public affairs and legislative liaison, we have a new person since last year, and she comes from the Department of Agriculture, and her name is Mary Catherine Yurda. So feel free to ask her any questions, and we'll be there for you. We've given each of y'all a folder, a lot of information in there about what we do. I tell people, and for the benefit of the new members, when I first got this job, I got asked 2 questions at home. The first one was, when do I get a gator tag? And the second one was, when do you get your gun and badge? And so I say that jokingly, but a lot of folks think DNR is just the green trucks and game wardens. And so hopefully this folder, and I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman, our briefing will tell you a little bit more for the new members about what we do. We have 1,489 employees. 525 of those are part-time. We have a $130 million budget, a $67 million state funds, $20.5 million is federal, and $42.5 million is from user fees and monies we generate ourselves. We operate through 5 divisions. I'll start with Wildlife Resources. It's located down in Social Circle. It's broken into 3 parts: game management, fisheries, and non-game. In our game management, we operate 111 wildlife management areas, 17 shooting ranges, 18 archery ranges, and in all, DNR manages over 1 million acres of public lands, and hunters have an economic impact of $1.6 billion a year. In our fisheries section, we operate 10 public fishing areas, 144 boat ramps, 7 hatcheries, and our anglers of Georgia have an economic effect worth $1.9 billion a year. Our non-game section is charged with developing and implementing recovery plans for species currently listed or threatened or endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. And as I've said in other committees that some of you are parts of, we have 121 animals just in our state that are up for consideration. So we're working to prove to Fish and Wildlife and other agencies that we are taking good care of these species. In our parks and historic sites, that's another division. We provide outdoor recreation and opportunities through 45 state parks and 18 historic sites. We welcome 7.5 million visitors to our state and our state parks each year, which generate an economic impact of more than $550 million a year. And then the division I started with, our law enforcement division, we created that 2 years ago. And as you know, we're sort of known for the off-the-pavement law enforcement. But we patrol state and federal-owned land, approximately 500,000 acres of impounded waters, 16 miles of streams and waters, and 100 miles of coastline. And we also serve as a support role in times of weather emergencies with GEMA, as we did last year. We have 2 smaller divisions. One of them is Coastal Resources, which is located right before you go over the bridge on Highway 17 in Brunswick, Georgia, in the marsh, and it manages Georgia's coastal marshlands. As some of you may not know, we only have 100 miles of coastland, but we have approximately one-third of the entire salt marsh on the eastern seaboard of the United States, a very important habitat. Our saltwater fisheries contribute more than $500 million annually to this state's economy. So not only do we enforce the Shoreline Protection Act and the Coastal Marshland Protection Act, we do regulate the saltwater fisheries as well, shrimp, oysters, and finfish. And then my smallest division is historic preservation. It's located on the Capitol campus over behind the Attorney General's office. And it has two main functions. It promotes preservation and use of historic places. It administers the tax credits and does Section 106 surveys for the federal government. Anytime federal dollars are used for economic projects in the state of Georgia, we come out and do the surveys for the sites for historic properties. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman and committee, we've undergone a lot of change over the last few years, and I think we've emerged as a leaner, stronger organization. And we certainly couldn't do it without the support of this committee and Chairman Smith's Committee on House Natural Resources. So I thank you for your time, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have one to begin with, and we'll accept some questions from the committee. What about the health of our eagle population on the coast?
I may need Dan for specifics, but that's been a true success story. I have Dan Forrester behind me. I think at last count we have right at 170 known eagle nests. There's probably a lot more, but we have those GPS'd and we fly those nests annually, and we've seen great successes there. That's been a true success story. Yes, sir. And that's not how many we have. That's how many we fly and check. I'm sure there's more.
Thank you. Questions for the commissioner or comments? Number?
Thank you guys for the help. You know, he mentioned the event that we do every year out of Sweetwater. And if you haven't been to Sweetwater, it's a wonderful, wonderful park, and you guys do a fantastic job of maintaining it, and I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to working with you guys again on May 16th.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
And Sweetwater's best days are ahead of it. As you know, we're putting in some yurts there. The governor was there with us when we announced that, and look forward to that opening so we can have some overnight there.
Yep.
You folks know what yurts are? Everybody on the committee?
I didn't mean to cuss anybody.
I know you did. Why don't you explain to the committee?
A yurt is they're real good for folks that aren't used to camping and have never tent camped, and so it's sort of halfway tent camping and halfway camper camping. It's a wooden structure with a wooden floor. It has cabinets in it, a little small kitchen, and some nice beds, but it has a canvas top, so you get that tent feel, and it's sort of taking someone from never camping at a little halfway point to ease them into it.
The first lady stayed in the last time, 'cause I know she stayed out there.
She was out there, but I don't think she spent the night.
Oh, okay.
She was there, but she has been very gracious on her book tours around the state and reading to school children. She more times than not stays at our state parks, and we appreciate that.
And we appreciate you, Representative Bruce, for being involved in that event.
Great event.
Now, let me tell y'all, the mics work just like they do across the street. If you touch them, if you want to speak, it flashes up here, so I won't have to ask you which number. I'm learning how to work these things a little bit better. So if you'll do that, we'll acknowledge who you are. And anybody else have a question or comment for the commissioner? Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you and the staff being here. I don't know if you're going to be around, but I think some of you will be around if after the meeting anybody has a question. They may, and we're good to see y'all. You have in front of you, I ask you to take a quick look at on our committee rules. If you looked over them, if you have a question, we'll hear that now. If not, we would entertain a motion on our committee rules that we'll operate under for this year. Move to adopt. Do I hear a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. We have a set of rules we'll go by. At this time, we'll take up the bill we have scheduled for the day is HB 160. Representative Emory Donahue. We'll ask you if you'll step up to that mic, Emory. And if you want to have a seat, or would you prefer to stand? Okay.
And I'll stand right here if that'll work. Thank you. One of the things that I was asked this year by the DNR, they come up and asked me if I would carry a bill to help them better the state of Georgia for an understanding that we have a lot less trappers. HB 160 is basically doing one thing. We have less trappers and less furriers, so we have an overpopulation of raccoons. What's happening now, and I think we have statistics, is basically rabies are going up. We have more counties reporting them each and every year. So I told them I would look at this. This bill does one thing, and basically one thing only. It allows, during the time of November the 20th through February 29th, where you can trap raccoons in the southern zone, you can't north. North is anywhere from this line that you have a picture, green. This is the northern zone that where if you do trap during that time, you're going to be receiving a ticket. And basically all this does is erases the line and allows the rest of the part of the state of Georgia to be reciprocal with the southern part to become one in the trapping. That's all it does. Everything else is already in law. So there's no new language. There's no ghost in the closet. Basically, this is the only thing it does.
Representative, that's March 1 through November 19th. Is that?
Well, it's trapping March 1 through November 19th.
Okay.
And then we have the unlawful to trap is November 20th through February 29th.
Gotcha. Any questions for Representative Donahue? Is that all you have right now?
Yes.
Any questions? That was simultaneous. Yours two, right, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Two of them came on at the exact same time. Number two. Chairman Meadows.
On that line that was drawn, when was that line drawn?
Sir, I'm not 100% on the date that it was drawn. It was like 35, 40 years ago, I think, if I remember from what I had read. I mean, I'm not sure if it was 1963 or sometime in there. Maybe someone could speak to that, but I know it's back in the 60s.
Representative, why don't you pull that mic? Well, let me just turn on that other mic for you, and you can leave that one. Punch that button, if you will. Emery, what button? Which one is that?
10.
Okay. Other
Back
questions?
then, sir, in all fairness to the question, we had so many trappers, they were a little bit nervous that we might overharvest the raccoon population. So that was pretty much why they had that line there. And now that we have less trappers and less furriers, and the hides aren't really worth anything, basically we're overpopulated. And that's why we want to remove the line again.
How many of those 180 cases of rabies are north of that line?
Mr. Vice Chairman, do you know that?
Well, I reached out to my public health folks and looked at the reported cases in 2014, 3 in Floyd County, 3 in Gordon County, 1 in Fannin County, Murray County, and Gilmer County, and then those were the ones for Northwest Georgia. And then they also referred me to a report from 2012 from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and their reporting system. And in 2012, we had 373 rabies cases reported in Georgia. Of those, 180 were raccoons, bats, skunks, foxes, other wildlife. And of course, the rabies question is something that is very serious for both our human safety as well as our animals, as far as cattle, dogs, cats, our domestic animals, and their exposure. And so we are seeing an increase in rabies reporting cases throughout the state. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chairman.
What do you do with a raccoon after you trap it?
That was my question. We very carefully handle it. I would say some people relocate it. Most people probably will take and harvest that animal, and they will skin it and use it for fur. My goal is to make a couple of hats out of it.
Harvest doesn't mean eat, right?
Some people it does mean eat, yes. Some
So-
people like raccoon, I understand.
So I could just buy you 2 Davy Crockett hats and we're going to be all right.
That would be fine with me. Of course, I have 2 grand boys that would probably want those also, sir.
I'll get you 4 of them. Sometimes I think down here we try to fix a problem that doesn't seem to be a problem. I've had 3 cases in Gordon County. I've had 3 calls from Gordon County. Is that this big a problem over North Georgia?
In Hall, I can tell you of personally, and I'm in the woods before I took this position quite a bit, and on the lake quite a bit, of seeing rabid raccoons and skunks. And that's just the time that I would be in the woods. I would say from hunting as a child and with coonhounds, we pretty much didn't see as many back then, and I couldn't tell you except I've noticed it over the last 10 or 12 years, more animals. And I have quite a few pictures of them on tape where they're destroying crops and stuff on our farm.
What kind of population what does the population need to be?
Let Mr. Forrester speak on that.
Let's go, Dan, if you will, we'll go ahead, why don't we go ahead and, Mr. Chairman, we'll come back to you with some other questions. We'll let Dan Forrester, if he will, give some testimony at this time. Is that, Mr. Chairman, you have the floor for questions, are you okay if we do that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You bet. My name is Dan Forrester, and it's my pleasure to serve as the Director of the Wildlife Resource Division, position I've held for a decade now, and appreciate your attention to this matter. Essentially, there's 2 points to the bill. One is trapping is, in fact, a legitimate recreational pursuit, and it's one that we certainly support. This particular law was a holdover from a debate that occurred back in the 60s, and it was largely a social debate between the hunters and the trappers. At that time, there was concerns over a limited resource, a sharing of that resource, a conflict, if you will, between trappers and those that like to chase raccoons with hounds. And at the end of that debate, because raccoon populations in the north are less than they are in other parts of the state, the line was drawn. It was put into statute, which many of those things that the Department of Natural Resources regulates is held for regulation, but this was one that raised the level of debate to the General Assembly at that time. Since that time, a lot has changed. We have only about 300 licensed trappers in the state. We've got a resource now that by all indications can sustain harvest. Those that chase raccoons with hounds, very few of those actually harvest raccoons. There's not an economic driver there. So this, in respect, gets rid of a line, an arbitrary political line, if you will, that really isn't based on the biology and would provide opportunity. We, a couple years ago, re-engaged both constituencies on this particular issue to see if there were remaining wounds, hard feelings, some lines drawn in the sand, and what we found was that this was in fact an old issue, and we got broad-scale support for that. And we actually had a regulation at that time in place that mimicked the law. And we removed that regulation, but we still have by law this basis. So, I would say we've got a legitimate recreational opportunity here, one that that population will support. But the other thing, which is more to what you've been speaking about, is that prohibition is silent to whether or not trapping for recreation or for controlling a nuisance animal around your home. This removal of this particular prohibition would give way for folks that are dealing with individual nuisance problems around their home, particularly in cases where there may be concern for rabies. It does free that up too, which is something we certainly would support.
Questions for Mr. Forrester? I think that's you.
You got me now?
We got you now.
And I would say that I'm very glad to serve on this committee and appreciate what you do and all the DNR. I know that where we live years ago, when coon hides got up to $25 and $30, there was some trapping. Where we're talking about would be control. I think a coon hide's $1.50, $2 now. I wouldn't skin one of them out for it. And fur is beginning not to be worn as much. To give you an example, I didn't kill them, but I went out in my garage and I left a car window down about that far, and there were two. They were kitten coons, but I guess they'd been eating enough cat food that they weighed about 6 or 7 pounds. They're not afraid of me. I may be in violation. I had to kill a coon last week on my mother-in-law's back porch. It was in a cat bed. It was suffering from some type of waste disease. I don't know what it was. It was not afraid of me, and I killed it with about a 3-foot stick. It was going to die, and it's a big concern in our area, and nobody at this certain time is going to be trapping coons for the hides. I can tell you that. Now, if coon hides go to $25 or $30, that will be a possibility. To answer the Chairman Meadows, I had some pretty good coon hounds and hunted all over the eastern United States and placed in the World Hunt. Used to have a dog that'd tree 20 coons a year. You had a pretty good dog. You tree 100 coons a year now in North Georgia. But now the hunters don't harvest that many coons but there's not any night hunters much anymore, and absolutely no trappers. And my support for the bill, if I decide to support it, would be strictly out of a controlled rabies situation. As one of your ex-officers and Mr. Lawton Massengale put out, check coons at my plant. We had about 15 coons in our plant. They weren't afraid of people. They'd walk over their feet. And you could transport a coon 20 miles, it comes back to where you got it from. And unfortunately, I'm an animal lover, but sometimes you just have to eradicate them to get rid of them. And they're not afraid of humans like they were. And that's all I got to say. And there is overstock of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Tarvin. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the newest member of this team, I was a little surprised. I received about 10 emails on this, and the questions they were asked, I'm not a hunter, and I have no idea what the traps look like that would be used to catch raccoons with. But the questions that were posed to me were, what about the family animals if they're in close proximity to a home or other people's animals? Are these traps the kind that would kill an animal? Because many folk have small dogs and the like as well. And so we don't have the problem in Augusta, Georgia, up in the outlying region. So I don't know if it's a regional problem or is it something that I'm not sure. But I know that I've received about 10 emails to the contrary. So I just wanted to ask and inquire.
That's certainly a fair question. What I would say to that is you can currently trap a lot of different species across the state. And it's occurring probably on this very day in just about every county, somewhere, shape, or form. A lot of folks are targeting coyotes now, more so than other animals. So the fear is one that some folks have, mainly because they're not familiar with and don't understand what's going on. Trappers certainly don't want to catch a pet. There's been tremendous strides made in the way folks trap to avoid that very issue. There's other laws that guide trapping so that it is done in a sustainable, humane way, that kind of thing. So all that applies across the board. This is simply a very small piece of that says now if you're trapping, coyotes in this part of the state and you catch a raccoon, you certainly are not breaking the law. And if you so choose, you could target raccoons.
Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dan, if I may, question, just to make sure I'm clear on everything, you can currently hunt coons in the northern zone, right?
That's
raccoons. Correct. By removing this line, it just makes it all one rule, one law for the entire state on the trapping portion.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Chairman Meadows.
We talked about the problem is apparently rabies. Is that what the problem is?
The increase of raccoons is what we understand the main problem. And if you do trap above that line, you are penalty of a ticket because you're breaking the law.
Yes, but I don't want to mischaracterize. Trapping is not the end all to a rabies program. Essentially, we've got trapping, which the state views as not only a legitimate activity, but it's embedded in the Constitution as a right. And we've got folks that desire to pursue that recreational activity. We've got a prohibition that is not based in biology, so recreationally speaking, providing that opportunity is what has been driven some of our constituency. Perhaps the added benefit is that you do now have the ability to control nuisance animals and plights in and around your home where you can't use this tool currently. With respect to rabies, USDA has been involved in a program for over a decade now to try and control and push back raccoon form of rabies from the northwest corner of this state, ultimately driving it away, and they're doing this by dropping vaccinated baits across a line which they'll move over time to push raccoon rabies out. So I think there's some added benefits with respect to rabies, but that's not necessarily the driver. It's more of an opportunity based in science and recreation that our folks want to pursue there, where we pursue another 2/3 of the state.
My question was going to, is there been a decrease in rabies in this white section as opposed to an increase in rabies in this green section?
And I don't know the answer to that question, sir.
The only data I had was statewide data. It was not regional.
Call me.
Oh.
When it's time to vote.
Okay, will do. Thank you, I remember now. That's you. We'll come back to you. Representative LaRicca.
Just two comments, really. I agree with just making this available to the entire state. You got it 2/3 of the state, no reason why not to open it up. But I never was good at math. But I feel like one less raccoon is one less opportunity to get bit. Now, how you track that is uncertain, but if combining everything together with the recreational opportunities, and Commissioner Williams was talking about the economic impact that hunting and fishing has in this state, it adds some to that, but rabies is certainly an issue. I have known of a person that had gotten bit by a raccoon. He was trapping. But if you just get rid of part of them, you're reducing the possibility. The question I would have for Mr. Forrester, don't we currently track with licenses in these areas people that trap? I mean, they apply for a license to trap, or so we would know pretty quickly in that North Georgia region, those that have applied for a license, to be able to just, or you wouldn't know what they were trapping. do they trap at all in that North Georgia region, or just not coons, or what?
They do trap, and yes, you are required to have a license, so we do track that, and we would know if there was a change in license buying habits, or if we added more folks, and we know the residence county of those that purchased, so we would know if this had any kind of measurable increase in trapping.
So they do trap in that region now.
Correct.
And so that kind of answers the question about whether or not a feral cat or a cat gets in there. He's already got an opportunity to get in those traps south of that line. And so we hadn't had any instances of complaints of people saying, you know, my cat or my dog's getting in a trap.
Thank you. Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Representative LaRicci just cleared up my maybe a little bit of gray understanding here, but Mr. Dan, it is correct to say that in the northern zone now, they're already trapping. This is just making it where they can trap raccoons.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
To the author and to Mr. Forrester, I think we're going to hear from some other folks that wanted to speak now. In this posture, I think we'll take it this time. We'll hear from them, and then we'll come back to any follow-up questions or clarifications that we may need after that. At this time, we have a couple of folks. Miss Julie Robertson. Miss Julie, if you will come up, we'll be glad to hear from you, and Mr. John Eberhardt after Miss Robinson. Ms. Robinson, you have the floor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Robertson, and I am on the board of Georgia Animal Rights and Protection, and here to represent over 2,000 members in the state of Georgia. The Wildlife Commission already allows raccoons to be trapped in all counties of Georgia, even those counties otherwise prohibited by law, and landowners can get a permit at no cost, so HB 160 is not at all necessary. Traps are indiscriminate, catching the first animal to step on them. Each year, traps in the United States injure and kill millions of non-target animals, including domestic dogs, cats, rabbits, deer, songbirds, and endangered and threatened species. The use of legal traps in urban settings such as DeKalb and Fulton and Gwinnett would be a disaster, particularly for domestic cats and dogs. As rabies is a concern, exposure to the public by allowing the public to trap them should not be encouraged. Representative was asked what would people do if they trapped a rabid raccoon, and he replied some would relocate the raccoon, which is the last thing. Oh, okay, but relocating any of them is that's how rabies got introduced to Virginia. Raccoons from Florida were taken up to Virginia and relocated so that the trappers would have more raccoons, and that has caused rabies to spread all the way up the East Coast. Rabies is carried in saliva, so anyone handling a trap that a rabid animal touched or the fur of a rabid animal would be exposed. Trapping can actually increase the spread of the disease. Raccoons are territorial, and by removing mature animals who have acquired immunity to the disease, trappers make room for newcomers who may not be immune. Also, animals infected with rabies do not eat during the latter stages of the disease and therefore do not respond to baited traps. Traps set in an area infected with rabies will more than likely capture healthy animals rather than infected animals, thereby increasing the likelihood that the disease will be spread. The Centers for Disease Control, the National Academies of Sciences, and the World Health Organizations are all against using trapping as rabies control. Trapping generally removes healthy individuals from the population rather than sick, aged, and very young animals, most often subjected to natural selection, so trapping actually works against nature's selection process. The most successful attempts to control rabies in raccoons have utilized bait containing all rabies vaccines. fox rabies has been virtually eliminated in Europe due to the distribution of all rabies vaccines. Another thing, too, if people are talking about getting bitten by rabid raccoons, according to the Center for Disease Control, human rabies cases resulting from raccoons are very rare. In fact, in the past 50 years, there have only been 2 documented cases of human deaths, and one was in 2003, the other one was in 2013 from a complication of an organ transplant. So this is a very rare occurrence. And given the fact that people in these counties can already trap nuisance raccoons, there's simply no need for HB 160. The Department of Natural Resources is authorized to issue wildlife control permits allowing property owners to trap and kill nuisance animals, and this authorization applies to every county. I ask you to oppose HB 160.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. Does anyone have would you take a question if
Sure.
there is one? Does anyone have a question for Ms. Robertson? Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to follow you there in your presentation, but you were making a point, and I hope you can draw it back from memory
Sure.
or on your page. You said taking the raccoons out of the population that are infected makes room for something, and I missed what you were saying. Could you go back and explain that, please? Taking the infected raccoons out and their immune systems have strengthened to...
It'll allow, because raccoons are territorial. And I lived up in North Georgia for 15 years out in a wooded area, and for 4 years I had one raccoon that guarded my house and my property, anywhere around my house, and she was obviously an alpha raccoon, and no other raccoons came around, no other raccoons came near my house, and that was her territory. About 4 years something killed her, and then immediately, younger raccoons moved in, and they're territorial. And so the ones that are immune to they build up immune to diseases. You trap in those and moving them, and it just causes a lot of movement of raccoons, so that causes the spread of disease. And people handling them or possibly relocating them is about the worst, or is the worst thing that you can do.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chairman? You take another question? Is this primarily, just so I can kind of get my mind wrapped around your presentation, are you primarily concerned with the trapping of raccoons or trapping in general?
Well, we're talking about trapping of raccoons.
Okay, is that your main concern, trapping raccoons?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what we're here today to discuss, yes.
Other questions?
I did not know raccoons were that territorial, but I believe you when you say they are. And like in my driveway, February, coons usually rut. But this was back last fall when they were not, and there was about 10 in my yard in North Georgia. So I don't know which one was dominant. But say they are territorial, by thinning those out, which I don't agree with. I mean, I'm not here to argue the point. I love animals too. The natural process is quite cruel. If you've seen some of these animals really suffer. If you thin those out, there'd be more territory for those to be where they wouldn't be around my house. I guess that's a legitimate question, if you understand what I'm saying. If you take some out of these areas where them being territorial, that would leave more room for them to go where there's not people. Is that true?
Well, if people leave out cat food and garbage, they attract raccoons.
Unfortunately,
education, public education, the raccoons are going to move from the woods to near the houses because
I fully understand, but people that have cats are unfortunately put cat food out for them, and I agree with you. That does cause part of the problem. It really does. Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you think that there is such a thing as an overpopulation of raccoons? Do you think that there could be such a thing as an overpopulation of raccoons?
I haven't looked at all the figures in North Georgia, but if there is an overpopulation, trapping's not any solution to that.
Okay, and that would lead me to the follow-up question. Hypothetically, if there's an overpopulation of a raccoon? What do? The challenge that our DNR has in wildlife management is to not let it get to that point before we implement some sort of a plan or strategy to allow either the recreational hunting and harvesting or natural. And natural is ugly when diseases and things like that come in. So I guess at what point in that raccoon's population do you recommend somebody step in, I guess is my question, because governing is a very challenging thing. And this is one of those decisions that we have to make that can be tough. And so I'm just trying to figure out where that line is in the population and what do you recommend somebody do about it?
I would have to get back to you about exactly like what the population is in North Georgia. When I lived up there for many, many years, I didn't see that there was a problem. But for one thing, using trapping as a way of population control, you're trapping off the healthy animals. And most likely with trapping, it's indiscriminate. And the healthy animals are going to be the ones out foraging for food, and you leave the sick ones, the sickly ones, the aged ones, that would be the first ones to get to the food in the trap are going to be the healthy ones. And so this is no valid way for population control. I don't know what the answer is because I haven't so far faced any area that has a raccoon population. You say nature is cruel, leg hold traps are cruel too, and nature, at least it's the right, it does the right selection.
Good discussion. Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Robertson. We
Okay.
appreciate your testimony and you answering the questions.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. Mr. John Eberhart? Yes. Mr. John, if you'll tell us again who you are and who you're with, we would appreciate that, and we'll hear from you at this time, sir. We appreciate you being here and sharing with us.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members, thanks for this opportunity to speak. I'm John Eberhart of the League of Humane Voters, Georgia chapter. League of Humane Voters is present in 12 states. If I might first speak to the members' question from earlier, because that question was so well taken. Can you hear me? Am I speaking all right? Okay. There are no more raccoons than the land can support. Natural forces regulate wildlife numbers without human intervention. And today, since the illegal release of and proliferation of coyotes by hunters from starting back in the 1930s, you have some predation pressure on raccoons that you didn't used to before that. This bill is based on a false premise. Trapping is not for wildlife population control. It is not for rabies control. It is recreation. Some of it is for profit, and that's about it. What is the bill really? Were it enacted, who would profit? The Wildlife Division of DNR would profit. It would sell the licenses for trapping, and probably the nuisance wildlife control operators that it also licenses would profit. The Wildlife Society Bulletin in 1997 wrote, quote, "Private nuisance wildlife control operators, NWCOs, are a growing, largely unregulated industry killing millions of U.S. animals." The Centers for Disease Control and World Health Organization do not support trapping for rabies. The National Academy of Sciences had a committee on this subject which concluded, quote, "Trapping campaigns as a means to control rabies should be abolished. There is no evidence that these costly and politically attractive programs reduce either wildlife reservoirs or rabies incidents. The money can be better spent on research, vaccination, compensation for losses, education, and warning systems, unquote. In one study, 29% of trapped raccoons had ring off, chewed off or wrung off a limb, leaving it in the trap. Keep in mind, a trap is a blind mechanical device that can't make distinctions. It can't think, now here comes the neighbor's pet, I won't clamp down and crush it. The bill would result in minefields of traps and many unintended victims, including pets, deer, and turkeys. And there are many small game hunters in northern counties. So once again, hunting dogs would be crippled in traps. So this old dispute between hunters and trappers would resume. Where raccoons are trapped, they compensate partially by having larger litters. To the point earlier about the territoriality of raccoons, one of the best buttresses, offsets that you can have, deterrents for rabies, it tends to be that in the dispersal phase, when young animals, as it were, teenagers, are out looking for places to set up a home for themselves, it tends to be those animals and transients who are the sick animals. The established, especially adult raccoons that are defending a territory, fend those animals off. And in the acute phase of the disease, they're not likely to live anyway. So as they bounce around, probability has it that they will encounter a car or a predator before long. So better not to create a vacuum into which the sick animals can inhabit. Thank you.
Wait, okay. Thank you, Mr. Eberhardt.
Thank you.
Would you take a question, sir?
Certainly.
Representative Tarvin.
I apologize to this committee and you guys. If you'll remember, I said it was more of a nuisance problem to me, and I mentioned rabies. This bill is not about, and I apologize for bringing rabies into it. My part, the trapping, as the young lady said, you already can get nuisance trappers, but it would thin out those raccoons, and it is a problem to me in my community. Rabies is not in this bill, is it? And I brought that up, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman, because I muddied the water. And it's not about rabies. It's about a recreational trapping and something that's done in 2/3 of the state. And I do apologize, sir.
No problem.
Thinning them out creates those very spaces that we mentioned for sick animals to move into, and recreational killing of wildlife that belongs to all the people. Is that really something that government should be in the business of promoting?
I have been a coon hunter. I've never killed an animal that someone did not eat. That's my personal feeling.
Yes, sir.
I'm an animal lover.
Yes, sir. Well,
if I kill a deer, we eat it, and if I kill a coon, someone eats that animal. I do not like it. I've eaten 2 of them. But I just want you to know that I tried it the second time. But recreational hunting is something that's dear to me and my family personally. That's not as your cause is to you.
Yes, sir. I
respect
that.
I see it as a right, and you see it as an animal's right. I can appreciate that.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. John. We have another question.
Rabies tends to be a bloody shirt that game managers and trappers wave before the public and to incite trapping.
Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure again I'm clear because we keep talking about these traps and what they can do and the dangers of them.
Yes.
But now I want to make sure I'm clear, Mr. Dan, if I may address you on this. We're trapping in the northern area of Georgia already, correct? Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure.
Other questions from Mr. John? What? No. Pull that over to you, David. Chairman Knight, well, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you. I run up from a Ways and Means Committee meeting. I heard we were still having discussion, but well, I'm not a biologist, but I sometimes try to play one. But a couple of things you said. The coyotes,
yes,
I don't think the coyotes are responsibility of the hunters. That's probably one of the nation's most adaptable animals, and I'm not sure why placing a blame on their spread and placing that blame on hunters is even relevant to the discussion. Second of all, outside of rabies, you talk about wildlife and management. The raccoons are probably one of the largest nest predators that we have. So when it comes to nest predators, nesting birds, turkeys, quail, a lot of the things that our hunters enjoy, they're probably one of the largest culprits that is out there in regards to declining, in some cases, declining populations. So they will, tend to destroy a whole nest of eggs. So you wonder why our populations are declining. That's probably one of the reasons. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about. There are a lot of reasons for trapping them. I live in Griffin, which is south of the line, but I will tell you that the rabies issue is a serious issue. The secretary who works for our office lives probably 3/4 of a mile down the street from me. 2 dogs in the back, and one of them was they actually killed the raccoon, but the dog ended up testing, and the raccoon tested positive for rabies. And I can tell you that we live in a neighborhood, and that bothers me. That bothers me with a lot of young children around, plus other pets and animals that could be exposed. So I think this is a real issue, and a very important one. So I just want to make those statements.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. Representative Dickerson.
Chairman, I just wanted to get clarification. I've heard a lot of testimony here, and this bill is just simply moving the line, just erasing the line, right? It's nothing to do with the diseases or anything. Is that correct? Okay,
Yes,
I just wanted to get
correct.
that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. John, if you would like to finish up, if there's anything you need to say now, and we appreciate your testimony.
Yes. To Representative Knight's point, if I may, yes, rabies is important and must be addressed. Rabies is endemic. It's always present at low levels in wild populations here in the Deep South at maybe a 1 or 2% rate. Because it is important, it's important that we devote resources to it appropriately and efficiently, such as the oral baits, vaccination programs, instead of just going out and setting a bunch of traps to kill a bunch of animals, many of whom are not even raccoons. And it's ironic that coyotes, which were originally illegally introduced to our state by hunters, fox hunters, I believe it was in Turner County in 1930. Someone might correct me on that. It's ironic that coyotes have spread and proliferated now to 159 counties, and yes, they exert predation pressure on nest predators such as coons and skunks and so forth. So they do, there is some benefit from them. So thank y'all.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. Appreciate you answering questions. You were an excellent witness. All right, our posture is we're going to allow Director Forrester. Is there anything you need to wrap up with? You're an expert in this area.
There's been several questions again about the clarity of what this does, and Representative Nimmer is correct. It simply moves the line specific to raccoon trapping only. The other thing I'd add is the trapping regulations as are currently written do not allow for animals to be moved alive. The exception is coyote, raccoons. Their traps have to be checked every 24 hours and the animal dispatched there. So there's not going to be additional legal moving of raccoons with this expansion if it occurs.
Thank you for that clarity. If there are no other questions at this time, I'm going to allow Representative Donahue, the author of the bill, to wrap things up. We are considering House Bill 160, which is LC 400762. Representative Donahue, let's see, I think you're on 10 again, I believe. Is that
Yes,
correct?
Again, I would like for the favorable vote for HB 160 to be passed out of this committee. I thank you for each one, Mr. Chairman, and everybody here, and everyone that has spoke to this bill. Passionate of where you stand. I do understand. I appreciate that. I love animals also. But I think the main thing we're doing is we're just erasing a line that was in the 60s to give the opportunity for people to trap. And that's basically the only thing we're doing. No, doesn't change anything else. So if we could pass it out of committee, I would love the opportunity.
Thank you. We've had a vigorous, in-depth discussion. And certainly appreciate all of those who've offered the ideas on this bill. And at this point in time, I think we would be in a proper posture to recognize Chairman Pruitt on number 3. Chairman Pruitt?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend do pass.
We have a motion to do pass of House Bill 160. Do I hear a second? There's several seconds. And this time we'll take a vote. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Thank you. House Bill 160 moves out of committee with a do pass recommendation. We certainly appreciate all of you being present. We appreciate the supporting views and the opposing. Thank you all for being here. We stand adjourned.